Hey guys, my name is Leah, and today we are going to be talking about The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslye Walton. I first read this book last summer, and I remember whenever I read it, I actually really liked it. And I even tried to get my mom to read it, but that never really happened. You're missing out, Mom. It's kind of hard to explain what Ava Lavender is about because it seems to be about a lot of things. Ava Lavender is a generational story that is told from the perspectives of three different women. The first one is Emmeline, who immigrated with her parents and her family from France to Manhattan. There was a lot of family tragedy, and all of her family members unfortunately died. And so she had to marry pretty quickly because she wasn't really in a position where she could support herself, since this story is set in like the early 20th century. So she married quickly and she moved with her husband out to Seattle, where they bought this house that was perceived to be haunted. Unfortunately, tragedy continued to follow her, and her husband also died. She took the money that she inherited from her husband and she started a bakery with another woman. Everyone in the town kind of regarded her with suspicion because she was just kind of weird. Everyone in this family is just a little weird. She eventually had a daughter named Vivian. Vivian was very different from her mother. Her mother, Emmeline, was very withdrawn, reserved, didn't really speak. Vivian was very outspoken, very energetic, and very loving. Vivian fell in love once, and from this love, her two children, Ava and Henry, were born. They are twins. Ava was born with wings, which made her an incredible oddity to the family and to everyone, because who, is born with wings. So Vivian decided that it might be in Ava's best interest to not let her interact with other people, and kept her in this house. Of course, Henry, to them, was the most odd because he never spoke, but to us in our world wouldn't really be all that weird. I remember reading somewhere that Leslye has said that if Henry were born today, then he would be on the autism spectrum. So to us, that's not really weird, but he was considered to be the weirdest and oddest of the family. The first two stories take up about half of the book, I want to say, and then Ava's story, who would probably be considered the main character, takes up the last half all to herself. And this story is more about her finding friends, fitting in, all this kind of stuff. But of course there are roadblocks, and things happen that a lot of people shouldn't go through. Eventually what happens in the story is that there is a very pious man who moves into town and sees Ava through the window, and he sees her angel wings and thinks that she is divine, and he becomes obsessed with her. He was already kind of angel obsessed, but seeing her just kind of solidified his belief in angels. And unfortunately, this obsession kind of culminated in this very intense and aggressive sexual fantasy, where eventually he is able to get Ava alone and he rapes her. This is actually something that I really liked about The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender, was the way that it handled sexual assault. You don't see a lot of stories that tackle both male and female sexual assault, and it can show that males and female can be both the victims and the perpetrators. There is a character within the story named Gabe who shares his story where his mother died very young and he was on his own at a very young age. He was also very tall and very mature for his age, and he was able to get into the military pretty early on, way younger than he should have. When he was by himself, he started working as a handyman. So he was with this one woman who decided that she really liked him. Poor Gabe ended up being a victim of sexual assault whenever she propositioned him for oral sex. And so he freaked out and he yelled, "I am 13. I think it's actually really fantastic that the story doesn't hold like kitty gloves whenever it comes to this kind of thing for showing both male and female victims of sexual assault. Obviously you have Gabe and then you have Ava, and those two stories are kind of juxtaposed, even though the brunt of the story is obviously about Ava. Not only was Ava raped by this holy man, but he also cut off her wings, which is, you know, just another symbol of this violation against her. The rape itself was not written in any real detail, but you know, it was just kind of obvious that this is exactly what happened, and the removal of the wings was just kind of another level of this degradation and violation. The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender is something that could be considered magical realism, which means that this story does take place within like our world, but it does have some elements of like mysticism and fantasy. So obviously things like Ava's wings would play into that, but there are some other things that go into that as well, such as the other kind of weird gifts of the family, like being able to smell really well and stuff like that. Other examples of magical realism include things like Bone Gap by Laura Ruby or The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. If you liked reading those books, then I think Ava Lavender is a book for you. I know that I really liked it, but I also really like magical realism. It's like the most interesting things that you could really read about. Sometimes whenever you read magical realism, you get the sense of, is this really happening or is it not? And you know, that's just kind of up for the reader to determine whether this kind of stuff is actually happening, or if it's not and it's just allegorical. And that's something that I think is really nice. Leslye Walton's writing style is actually very poetic and kind of moves and flows in a very nice way. And oddly enough, I think that her writing style and the way that the story is told actually really reminds me of Southern Gothic literature. There's just something about like these situations and the way that she writes that is really, really reminiscent of authors like William Faulkner. So I think that was everything that I really wanted to talk about with Ava Lavender. So I will leave you now and see you in the next video. Bye!